Did you ever wonder why some Amish buggies are all closed in and some of them are open? You might think some are for the winter, some are for the summer, but that's not always true. Sometimes it has to do with what order that they're from. In the dead of winter, it is not unusual to see an open buggy with somebody all huddled up and driving their cart. That's another video to decide who has what kind of buggies. It does have to do with different sex, and it does have to do with the different rules that they have. But all of them have one thing in common. They want to keep warm while they're in their buggy. How do they do that? I'm going to share several different ways today that our Amish neighbors stay warm in their buggies. The most obvious way that the Amish stay warm when they're in their buggies is to dress warmly. They have coats and hats and gloves and everything that we have in the scarves, and they'll even put extra layers to help keep the warmth in their body. And if they get a little bit extra cold, they might use some blankets and quilts while they're in there as well. I did do an interview with a Mennonite woman who's one of my neighbors, and she said usually those two methods are pretty sufficient. She said most of the time that's all they need. It's on those really, really, really cold days, if they have to go out, that some Amish will use a propane heater. She did say that that wasn't the safest thing to do. There are some that still do it, but she herself, she said she stayed away from that because it can be dangerous. Another heating element that they can use is they can heat up bricks or stones, or they can heat up coals and put them into a foot warmer, which that's a really old-fashioned way. This was back from the 1800s, but are we surprised? No. So that's a method that they use when it gets really cold, or maybe if the other two, the blankets and the clothing, isn't sufficient enough. Last but not least, one of the things that the Amish will do is buy a buggy that's insulated, or they will insulate it themselves and put up extra insulation around the seats. And some of the buggies come with this insulation, even more so than what you see here. And it's becoming more and more of a common standard. And like I mentioned in the beginning, your old order Schwarzentroober Amish will not use any kind of propane or anything like that. They're going to stick with the very old-fashioned ways. Their buggies are not going to be enclosed. They're not going to have doors. And as you go into your old order and the new order Amish, you can kind of tell what they are by how their buggies have morphed with the times, if that makes sense. So the fancier the buggy, the more gadgets and the more doors and all those things, you're probably leaning more towards a new order group. So there you go. That's how they stay warm in the winter when they're out in their buggies.